The church bells rang like a cruel joke, each chime echoing through the vaulted ceiling and bouncing off the stained glass windows as if mocking her. Clara stood at the altar in a dress that had taken months to choose, a gown of lace and satin that clung to her like a second skin. Her fingers gripped the bouquet so tightly that the roses bent beneath the pressure, their petals bruising. She kept her eyes fixed on the massive wooden doors at the back of the church, waiting for him, certain that any moment now he would appear, late but apologetic, flustered but still hers. Minutes ticked by. The whispers started softly, a ripple across the pews. The groom was missing. Where was he? Perhaps his car had broken down. Perhaps there was traffic. Perhaps he had been delayed by some trivial matter. Clara's heart pounded, with a hope that felt more fragile with every passing second. Her father cleared his throat in discomfort, his jaw tight as he avoided the stares of their wealthy guests. Her mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, not entirely out of sorrow for her daughter, but out of shame for what this scene would do to their family's reputation. The priest shifted uneasily, glancing at the clock that hung near the pulpit, each tick an accusation. Clara's chest grew heavy. 10 minutes passed, then 20. By 30, the cruel reality settled like a stone in her stomach. He wasn't coming. The man who had promised her forever had chosen to humiliate her instead, to vanish like smoke, leaving her to face the scorn of every pair of eyes now drilling into her. She heard the whispers grow louder. Less charitable now, less sympathetic. Poor girl. Someone muttered, perhaps she wasn't enough for him. Another voice, sharper, hissed, what a spectacle. Imagine being abandoned at the altar. I always thought she was too proud. The shame was unbearable. Clara's vision blurred as tears welled, but she refused to let them fall, not here, not in front of them. With trembling fingers, she tore the veil from her head, the delicate fabric ripping as it snagged on her hairpins. The gasp that rippled through the congregation was like a slap. She turned on her heel, gathered the heavy skirts of her dress, and ran. The doors slammed open as she burst into the gray daylight. The sky mirrored her despair, clouds heavy and swollen with rain. By the time her satin shoes hit the cobblestone streets, the first drops had already begun to fall. Her gown dragged against the ground, collecting mud and rainwater, but she didn't care. She ran as though she could outrun the shame that clung to her, as though she could escape the echo of their laughter, the pity in their eyes. She ran until her lungs burned, until her feet ached, until the only sound was the pounding of her heart and the relentless drumming of the rain. By the time she slowed, she found herself on the edge of town, where the grandeur of manicured gardens and marble fountains gave way to broken fences and forgotten corners. The old train station loomed before her, its windows boarded up, its roof sagging, a relic of a time long past. She stumbled up the steps, collapsing against the cold stone wall, her breath ragged, her chest heaving beneath the soaked bodice of her dress. The bouquet slipped from her fingers, the roses scattering across the wet ground like discarded memories. Clara buried her face in her hands and finally let the tears fall. They poured down her cheeks, mixing with the rain, indistinguishable from the storm around her. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to weep like a child abandoned in a cruel world. It was then she heard a voice, low, rough, unexpected. That dress looks heavy in this rain. Clara lifted her head, startled. From the shadows of the station emerged a man. His clothes were tattered, his coat frayed at the edges, his boots worn thin. His beard was thick and unkempt, his cap pulled low over his brow. By every outward sign, he was a tramp. One of those forgotten souls who lingered on the edges of society. She recoiled instinctively, clutching her arms around herself, her heart leaping with fear. But he didn't come closer. He simply crouched a few feet away, rummaging through a battered satchel before pulling out a coat, thin, patched, but still dry. He held it out to her with surprising gentleness. Here. No one deserves to be left out in the cold. The kindness in his tone disarmed her more than the sight of him had frightened her. Clara hesitated, then reached out with trembling fingers, accepting the coat. It smelled faintly of smoke and earth, but it was warm. And for the first time since the morning, she felt a flicker of comfort. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raw. The man gave a small nod, his eyes unreadable beneath the shadow of his cap. He didn't pry. Didn't ask why a woman in a wedding dress was sitting alone at an abandoned station. He didn't laugh or offer pitying words. He simply sat a short distance away, as though keeping watch, giving her space while still being there. Clara studied him through the curtain of her wet hair, puzzled by the calmness he carried, the quiet dignity in the way he held himself despite the rags. She should have stood, should have found her way back home, should have faced her family and the inevitable storm of whispers. But instead, Clara stayed. Something about the silence between them felt safer than anything waiting for her in the world she had just fled. The rain pounded against the roof of the station, the night deepened, and yet she did not move. When exhaustion finally claimed her, she lay curled on the cold stone floor, the tattered coat draped over her shoulders. As her eyes drifted closed, she heard his voice once more, softer this time, almost to himself. "Storms don't last forever." It was a strange thing to fall asleep comforted not by wealth or security, not by friends or family, but by the presence of a man who had nothing to give her except warmth in a storm. Yet in that moment, it was enough. For the first time since her world had shattered, Clara felt a fragile sense of safety, as though perhaps fate had not abandoned her entirely. And there, in the broken remains of a forgotten station, an abandoned bride, and a poor tramp, began a story neither of them could have imagined.